We continue with our broadcast this morning, and the question we need to ask is just how much can the Netanyahu government sustain the pressure that it is getting, not only from across the entire world, but also from within Israel now. We've learned over the last 18 months where we've seen thousands upon thousands of Israelis actually leaving Israel. And these are people, highly qualified people that are in the tech industry and other industries as well, not feeling safe in Israel and leaving the country. And together with that, there have been a lot of internal dynamics that have been playing out in the political landscape of Israel as well, and more on Netanyahu in terms of satisfying the ultra right in the forms of Smotrich and Ben Gvir and others as well. But also, we've seen an increase in protest action. We've seen so much take place where we've seen the streets of Israel and the major cities filled with hundreds and thousands of people making demands on Benjamin Netanyahu outside his house. We've seen people carrying placards and pictures of Palestinian babies that have been killed and calling him to stop this genocidal war. And the latest has been the cracks in the cockpit, because we're talking about 970 Israeli pilots who are now threatened and was facing expulsion for opposing the Gaza genocide. And to unpack this with us this morning is none other than Professor Jeff Halper, and he is the head of the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions. Prof. Jeff Halper, an absolute pleasure as always, seeing your smiling face, and wonderful you're able to join us this morning.
All right. Thanks for having us. Always good to be with you.
Right, Prof. Obviously, let's try and make sense of what is playing out within Israel. And
Mhm.
we have another development taking place. Pilots, 970 pilots. We've seen a huge list of names again. And these pilots are again, calling on the government that enough is enough. But again, we've seen the retaliation and we've seen the statements come through very, very strongly worded, threatening expulsion of these pilots.
hmm Yeah, there's been protests, the whole time, for months and months now, especially around the hostages in particular. Um, uh, and there's a lot of public outrage, as you've mentioned. But what breaks through is when the military people begin to raise their voices and protest, because this is kind of a sacred cow or a red line in Israel. You're not allowed to refuse, but at the same time, this isn't a letter of refusal. This is a letter of a calling on the government to end the war. But it's not a matter of a refusal. Uh, but nevertheless, it's military people. And when the military speak out, that kind of, like you said, that's the huge crack in the cockpit. But in addition to that, when the Air Force people speak out, the pilots in particular, they're the elite of the elite. That really means that's sort of the last straw. That means that everyone within Israeli society basically is against what's going on here. And so that's where it really, I think, broke through in a way that all the mass protests weren't able to do in the last few months.
Yes, Prof. But obviously, we've seen over a period of time in how this entire saga has actually played out for Benjamin Netanyahu and his government and his obsession with survival, or obsession with staying in power, and all of this. And I think the Israeli society and people in Israel have actually now got to the bottom of this. That a lot has to do with one man, his ambitions to stay in power, but also at the same time looking at all the corruption charges that have been leveled against him as well as a diversion and and as a distraction. And I think more and more Israelis, and perhaps you can confirm this, are actually now starting to get to terms with the truth.
Yeah, well, I think they've come to terms with the truth. I think it's months and months now that people have known this, that the war is really, and this is what the pilots emphasized in their letter, that this is a war that has it's exactly what you've said, is only political. It's only for his political survival. There is no military justification, and not only does it put the hostages in danger, and potentially it puts Israeli soldiers in danger if the fighting is escalated more. But even now, Israelis are saying, we're killing so many innocent, Palestinians. That's never been tremendously emphasized, but that was in this letter. So I think people are seeing the human cost is so tremendous here, and for no military reason whatsoever. And that's again where the letter of these pilots, and now, by the way, the Navy, the Navy, the people in the Navy are starting to organize a similar letter as well. So this is expanding. It's not just finished with the Air Force. I think when the military people come in and really say there is no military justification for this war, it is completely political, it's completely personal from the point of view of Netanyahu's own interests and staying in power, that I think, again, becomes a threat to the government. That's why they expelled these pilots from military service. I mean, we're about 60 that are actually in active military service, although there are others that are in the reserve duty. But that's really important, and it's a danger to democracy as well, because how can you be in reserve duty or a civilian and not be able to criticize government policy? But the point is, I think that that for months now, everybody's known that it's pointless. And I think, again, what raised the bar is the fact that these are our military people. The frustration is there's nothing whatsoever to do. Netanyahu has his coalition. He's got Smotrich and Ben Gvir, and he's immune, actually, to any pressure whatsoever. The only, and we'll talk about this in a second, I think, the only real pressure that can move Netanyahu at all is Trump. And I think that's beginning to happen.
Yes, in fact, I was going to actually raise this issue about Donald Trump, but also in terms of Netanyahu and his recent actions as well. We've seen Qatar Gate actually surface as well. Even we've seen Gallant obviously firing his defense minister and also the head of Shin Bet as well. All of this, starting to paint a clearer picture as far as Netanyahu is concerned, and the level that he is actually going to go through to stay in power. But many are saying that even with Donald Trump as well putting pressure on somebody like Benjamin Netanyahu, the cracks are there, and we are starting to see possibly the beginning of the end of Benjamin Netanyahu.
Well, I wish I could agree with that. I'm not so sure, because, again, he has a stable coalition government. There's certainly no opposition from within, his government. He has 65 out of 120 members of parliament, so it's a stable coalition. He's passed the budget, which is one of the big things. There really isn't any threat inside to Netanyahu whatsoever. I mean, it could very well be that he will survive his term. Now, it's the end of his political career from the point of view that he won't be reelected. I think that's pretty clear. And the Likud is way down in the polls, so it's a good chance they won't be able to form a coalition government either. But I think Netanyahu could, even though he's really unpopular, almost hated within the wider Israeli public, politically he's stable. And that's part of the problem. But I want to say one more thing. We can't pin too much of this on Netanyahu. For all, his power, and he's a central political figure and so on, we have to remember that that the Israeli public has moved tremendously to the right. So whoever replaces Netanyahu will have exactly the same policies. This isn't the Israeli public rejecting the idea of the war in Gaza or the reason for the war in Gaza because of October 7th, or the Israeli public becoming critical. They're critical of the way Netanyahu is running the war. They're not critical of the political policy behind it. They're not more sympathetic to Palestinians or to the suffering even in Gaza. This isn't leading to any change in the political policy of Israel towards Palestinians. So it's going to be more of the same. It'll be with a weaker political figure. It could be a Gantz, it could be Lapid, it could be somebody else, Eisenkot, but it's not going to be a change in the policy. And so we can get rid of Netanyahu as a personality, as a dominant figure, but the policies are going to remain, and that's something really that we're going to have to deal with in the future, if not Netanyahu himself.
Yes. Prof, obviously the immediate priority is for this genocide to stop in Gaza. And
Right.
you spoke about the Trump factor as well. And we know at this point in time that there are certain negotiations that are playing out. And just yesterday, I think the Haaretz reported decisions that possibly could maybe made in the next few days as well. And there's been a lot of to and fro that is going on at this point in time. And just to understand from your perspective, why do you still think that Donald Trump, who's been somewhat of a loose cannon as well, where throughout his campaign, he promised to bring an end to what is taking place in Gaza. There was this brief moment of a ceasefire deal, and it started again. And then he talked about ethnic cleansing and about removing 2 million people, the Riviera. So, can Trump even be trusted in this?
No, he can't be trusted. And I don't think Trump really has any concept of what's happening. And I don't think it really matters to him. Trump makes decisions on the basis of his own interests that have nothing to do with Palestinians, of course. I mean, part of the tragedy of all this is that the Palestinians, have no role in this. They have no status. Nobody cares. They're not part of the discussion. Within Israel, should we end the war? Shouldn't we end the war? Or everything. It has nothing to do with the Palestinians. Trump's decisions about whether to force Netanyahu to end the war, whether to bring back hostages, whether to get rid of all the Palestinians, send them to Indonesia, and create an Israeli-American Riviera in Gaza, or even the Arab governments, Saudi Arabia and the UAE and so on, that really are making all their own considerations in terms of normalizing with Israel without any consultation at all with the Palestinians. So I think that's part of the tragedy, that they're completely lost. But from the point of view of Trump, I don't think he even has heard of Palestinians, probably. He has his own considerations. And in a way, it's who talks to him last. So on the one hand, he supported Netanyahu in this revival of the fighting in Gaza. Witkoff completely disappeared. But on the other hand, the hostage families are visiting him all the time. He's always saying he wants the hostages released and so on. So those are two mutually exclusive things. I think where we are now is Trump is probably just tired of it all. And I think the hostages might have gotten through to him because some of his strong supporters in the U.S. are telling him the hostages have to come home. So I think he's at a point now where he's going to tell Netanyahu, end the war. We're going to do this negotiations with through Qatar especially, and we'll bring the hostages back. The issue is the hostages, not Palestinians, not Gaza, not the political issue. But it looks like we're getting to that point where it's simply Trump has decided for his own reasons that he wants to bring the hostages back. He wants to get the normalization. Don't forget, he wants the Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, as ridiculous and absurd as all that sounds, he wants a peace prize, And that's a major consideration. It is a major consideration. And he's pushing, and Netanyahu is too. We have to keep this in mind. Netanyahu has his eye on the big prize, which is normalization with the Arab world, Saudi Arabia falling in. Don't forget, on July 7th, there's going to be a meeting in the UN that's called by Saudi Arabia about the process of normalization. And this is really the greatest danger to the Palestinians, not only in Gaza, but in the West Bank as well, because they get erased completely. You get an apartheid regime here. Israel, with all its settlements, normalizes relations with the Arab world, supported by the United States. This is the big game behind everything else. This is what's going to bring Trump his Nobel Peace Prize. And this will be, in a way, Netanyahu's huge victory. He can say, look, you can criticize me on Gaza, but if I can normalize, after 130 years, Zionist settler colonialism over all of Palestine, if I've succeeded in Judaizing Palestine and the Arab world now agrees with that, I mean, I'll be the superhero of Israeli history. I'll be the modern Herzl that actually completed all of this. So we have to always keep the bigger picture in mind as well. Gaza is a piece of it, but there are much bigger considerations. And I don't think we've talked enough about this issue of normalization. That's how settler colonialism ends. It doesn't end by defeating the Palestinians. It ends by normalizing and simply by disappearing the Palestinians from the political agenda completely. And so from that point of view, I think, Trump probably also has that bigger idea. What is Gaza to him? He wants the Nobel Peace Prize. And I think that's why I think Gaza has become for him kind of a nuisance. And he just wants to get rid of it. And that's the only source of authority that can end the war, not all the protests and not all these letters that Netanyahu will listen to.
Well, Prof, I think I'm going to have to hold you to a more detailed discussion on normalization. You obviously have got my attention. You've piqued my interest. And this is something that we need to have on a more detailed platform, like we normally do on a Wednesday evening. So I'm going to have to hold you to that. And let's see what we can do and arrange something in the not too distant future. But for now, we thank you. We do appreciate you taking time out.
Okay, thanks for having me. It's good to see you.
Prof. Jeff Halper joining us out of Al-Quds this morning. And with that, we're going to go for a quick break. Next up, we'll be joined by Jaco Kotze.